Hey folks, Rich here, South Florida Beekeeping with Rich. Or today you might want to call it South Florida Beekeeping with Mr. Wizard. I don't know. We're going to go over the results, that is experiment plus time equals result. We're going to go over some things that I started several months ago and we just needed to have time to figure out where they were going to end up. So today is October the 10th. Last night, Hurricane Milton came across the state, sat out in the Gulf. There was a point at which it looked like it was going to wobble south, and we had to prep for at least we were under tropical storm warning. And then it actually slowed down a little bit. It went from a 5 to a 4 to a 3 when it made landfall, and it wobbled the other way and actually went further away from us. So here in South Florida, we're good. Most of the state of Florida has been ravaged. A lot of the state that wasn't ravaged a couple of weeks ago with Hurricane Helene have now been ravaged. So I do want to put in a plug for the fact that the Florida State Beekeepers Association is partnering with an organization called greatergood.org to raise funds to get particularly feed into the beekeepers in the damaged areas. greatergood.org, I checked them out online. 97% of their funds go to their programs. 1% goes to administration and 3% goes to fundraising. That's well within my parameters for giving to an organization. They are also a nonprofit, so your donations would be tax deductible. If you can give enough so that tax deductible really becomes a thing, good on you. We will include the link in the show notes descriptions for connecting directly to greatergood.org for beekeeper rescue in the state of Florida. So thank you if you can help with that. Next thing I want to talk about is the weather. We all know, hopefully we all know, that you don't want to work your bees when the barometer is falling. If it's getting ready to rain or anything else, the sweetest bees in the world will light you up. So what do you do when the barometric pressure is lower than what is considered ideal, happy, sunny weather, but it's still nice? Our weather out here today is the most beautiful it has been in 3 months, which is usually the case right after hurricane. It is sunny, it is breezy, the humidity is low. It's a great day to work your bees. But if you actually looked at the barometer, it is still below that line where it is considered good weather. The barometric pressure at this particular moment in time is 29.76. Okay, that factoid in and of itself doesn't give you anything. You need to know whether that is trending up or trending down before you want to go work your bees today. And yeah, you can go out and buy a fancy weather station, or you can get a nice barometer and get it all adjusted and all that, and then you can constantly be fiddling with it. Or you can do something a whole lot simpler, which is go to a website called localconditions.com. And that's just the way it's spelled, local conditions, capital C for conditions, capital L for local, localconditions.com. And on that website, they have a tracking over time component. So because of that component, I know that at midnight last night, the barometric pressure here was 29.6. All right. And that it has been steadily going up, tenth of a point by tenth of a point by tenth of a point all day long. And while 29.76 is not quite at that magic 29.8 spot that is really fair weather, it is trending up, and working your bees right now would be just fine. And it's a whole lot easier to figure that out on a nice graph than it is to try to constantly chase after your barometer and adjust it and make recordings and all that. So much easier. And it also gives you wind speeds and rainfall. I wouldn't have known we had a little rain shower at 4:30 this morning if I hadn't looked on that, because it was less than half an hour at 4:30 in the morning. Otherwise, we've had dry weather. Okay, so that's two things. One, if you have the money and can give a little something to beekeepers in Florida, thanks. And two, when it comes to weather, localconditions.com is a great website for beekeepers to have marked so that you know when to go work your bees. Okay, done with the public service announcements. Let's get on to some old experiments. I did a whole bunch of experiments with acetone because I wanted to learn more about using it. Those experiments were more than 3 months ago, and they kind of got tucked back over the side. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't really notice them until I was straightening up, getting ready for the hurricane. But okay, we're there, and everything is come out. So, taking straight acetone, putting propolis in straight acetone, dissolving it, and then letting the acetone all evaporate. Do we get something that looks like varnish? Because I was reading in some of my colonial information about the fact that propolis was sometimes used as a varnish during the colonial period. And well, here's the result of that one. I had this full up and I took the lid off and I let it all evaporate. Okay, so that looks hard as a rock, but it's really not. Even though I had the lid off of this for a long time, it's still a little on the gummy side. And this was done on pure acetone. So, there's absolutely no scent left in this at all. So whatever, this is apparently going to be about the final. If it is just, absolutely thin, like you brush it on with a paintbrush, that's pretty hard, although it's slightly sticky on the surface. But if there's any kind of buildup, it's just going to be gummy. But, there's uses for that. If you put that back in rubbing alcohol, it will quickly dissolve into a propolis tincture that you can use. But the question I wanted the answer to was, if I dissolve propolis in acetone and let all the acetone evaporate, how will my propolis be? And to do that, I did not start with a sludge. I actually started with some propolis tincture, okay, and put some acetone in it. I learned in my reading that a lot of people use a 2-part acetone to 1-part alcohol mixture for dissolving things like lacquers, okay? So in this particular instance, I let it all evaporate out, and that's what I was left with. But it was from a nice clear tincture. Okay, so the next thing would be these 2 jars. I have to be very careful here about how much I move them around. Okay. What you're seeing there is some propolis that had a whole lot of beeswax in it. And again here, some propolis that had a whole lot of beeswax in it, but I let the acetone evaporate off the top more. I wanted to find out whether acetone dissolves beeswax into any kind of usable product. Well, maybe you have a use for this. I don't. I'm going to tip this down. I'm going to scrape some of that off, and you can see that it really does, at least it takes the beeswax out of the propolis, and you would be able to then reprocess that propolis. I don't know what yellow, the yellow sludgy stuff on top, which doesn't feel as sludgy as you might think it would. This will be useful for painting the inside of swarm traps because the acetone will all evaporate off, and you'll have a nice clean layer of beeswax along with the propolis there. But I mean, other than the fact that, yeah, there's a lubricant property to it, but it's not a really thick lubricant property. This, as you might be able to tell from the bits of palm frond still in it, was the worst of the worst of the worst of the stuff that was left over when we took that swarm that fell, it was built inside of a palm frond. Uh, this is the stuff that would be absolutely useless to anybody, but I just, again, wanted to try it with acetone to see if I could separate the beeswax from the propolis in what was left, and it worked as far as that goes. Whether you'd ever have use for this information or not, I don't know. I don't think I am, because I'm not going to waste much time, effort, or acetone on trying to get this. I simply wanted to know the answer to it. So I can provide you with the answer as well as have it for myself, just in case, gee golly gosh, it ended up being something really cool. Same dealie here again. We have beeswax on top of propolis. But in this case, you know, the beeswax is in suspension over the propolis on the bottom, but it's a suspension of both beeswax and propolis because this was not allowed to evaporate out. It was kept sealed. But it did extract the beeswax from down in the propolis. So again, it's only going to be useful for painting the insides of swarm traps and such, or any other box that you want to make feel homey once the acetone is evaporated, which will happen very quickly. So other experiments that were going on, and I just wanted to make sure. So we have, notice, vodka here and 151 here, which is all we can get in the state of Florida. I wanted to figure out the best way to store propolis until I wanted to use it for something. And it occurred to me that instead of putting a little bit of propolis in a jar with a bunch of alcohol, if I filled the jar with propolis and just filled in between with alcohol, let's see how that stabilized. Well, it's been months and months and months now. Ooh, come on there, you. Yeah, and it's working just fine. This is the 151. It has it softened up nicely so that when we do want to use it in something else, it will come out quickly. Or if we want to just spread this out and let it dry in the sun and then grind it down, it'll be a much more uniform grade for doing that. But it's a good way because this was packed and just, you know, the alcohol was set in between. And then I did have to it did suck it in so that there was about this much propolis on top. And then I had to refill it with a little bit more. But that worked. Thought it would, but you know, until you actually do the experiment, you don't know. Vodka, same dealie. It's nicely stabilized. It's not made into a tincture or anything. It's just a good way to keep propolis so that it doesn't degrade. You know, if you just leave it sitting around in a ball in the shed or whatever, it gets kind of crunchy and crumbly. So another experiment. What is this one? Oh, yes. Okay. This is acetone done the same way. Same experiment as this, only done with acetone instead of alcohol. And look at the thickness of that sludge on the top. You pour off this little bit into a jar and add some alcohol to that, and you'd have a propolis tincture in good form. I don't think I'd want to wait for the acetone to evaporate off and then try to use it internally. I think I would stick with external. But that the acetone broke down the propolis far more than the alcohol did. So take that for what it's worth. But that also worked. So you're halfway there if you're trying to work on something and you need a whole lot all of a sudden, but you've stored it out like that. Now this last one, oh, that's a simple one. All this is the scrapings from inside the cone on my smoker, just one day scrapings. And some of those scrapings were thrown in here with a little bit of acetone and very quickly made a very strong solution, so strong that, as you can see, a lot of it didn't dissolve. At first it all dissolved, but then letting it sit and sit and sit and sit and sit, some of this came back down. Now, that is a very strong smoke solution. That much smoke solution put into a quart of vinegar would be more than enough to get it all nice and smoky.
And that's what you use on your hands.
And that, this added to some vinegar is what I use on my hands. Now let's find out the reason Oh, well, it's anecdotal, but everybody confirms it. So there's just never been a scientific experiment done on it. But if you put white vinegar on your arms, the bees don't seem to notice that you're, a mammal with hair anymore. That they don't tend to sting you very much. And if you put a little bit of smoke with that, then that confuses their olfactory senses even more. And if you do happen to get stung, then you can pull the stinger out and give yourself another squirt from the bottle of vinegar, and it completely masks the alarm pheromone, so you can keep right on working without getting stung over and over in the same spot. Now, first thing I'm going to do is pour a little acetone into here and see if that immediately dissolves up into something just about as strong as the original at saturation. I'm glad that missed my eye. Yeah, kind of looking that way. We're going to let that sit for just a second. Oh yes, no, I only use the clear tinctures to put it forward. I don't pour it in. I mean, like this is the clear enough tincture. All right, I actually went a little far, so there is a slight bit on the bottom. But I'm going to do this. I just wanted to compare the color, and it looks like this one is about it. Yep, at saturation. The stuff is settling out onto the bottom. I'm just doing this because this is a whole lot faster way to make your liquid smoke than doing it with just putting it into the vinegar. Because basically there you're only getting the water that's in the vinegar dissolving some of the smoke. So you should be able to get a stronger smoke this way. Yep. So it's just a way of saying that you don't need to scrape nearly as much of the creosote off the inside of the cone to make up your mixture if you use acetone rather than just doing it with vinegar and water. Of course, if you used alcohol, you'd get more than vinegar and water, but you'd get less than the acetone. So just information.
So what are your conclusions?
Oh, well, conclusion is just that she's asked me what are my conclusions. My conclusion is that acetone is a valuable tool to have in your toolbox to help speed up the processing of some of the things that I used to just do with alcohol or I used to just do with water and vinegar. But there is no magic bullet. I was really kind of hoping that I would get something magical in the sense of a wax suspension. But you look into this and you will see that it is just wax in suspension. It did not really make a solution per se. But, until you try, you don't know. You can only speculate. And speculation only takes you so far. Sooner or later, you got to try something out. And trying it out with a bunch of jars which most of these can now be dumped, tossed in the trash. We're done with it. I just wanted to try these things out, and it became apparent that some of this stuff was going to take a pretty long time component to work itself through. Okay, we figured it out. Not the most exciting video I've ever done. That's it. We came through Hurricane Milton just fine down here. A lot of the state didn't. Heart goes out to everybody. Donate if you can to the cause. Have fun, everybody, and stay safe.